"Don't touch my daughters!" shouted the millionaire, eyes wide and finger-pointing. But what he didn't know was that the boy with the sweet eyes and the necklace around his neck was carrying the biggest secret the Vanderholt family had ever hidden. And the woman he had just humiliated, calling her just the cleaning lady, was about to turn everyone's life upside down. Marla Dunley never wanted revenge. All she ever wanted was to work, take care of her son, and hold on to her dignity. But the world that tried to push her down had no idea of the quiet strength she carried inside. Get ready for a true story of resilience, with twists, emotion, and a powerful lesson about respect, justice, and courage. If you love stories that move and inspire you, subscribe now to the Fire Story channel, because here, every day, you'll hear stories that truly touch the heart. In the Vanderholt mansion, everything sparkled, except for respect. Persian rugs, imported Italian marble, windows overlooking the Ashley River, and yet an uncomfortable emptiness lingered. It was like all that luxury was just a cover for what the house really lacked: basic humanity. Cleaning ladies came and went. None of them lasted long behind those velvet curtains. Some left in tears. Others begged not to return. But no one dared to say out loud what really went on. After all, who would listen to an invisible woman scrubbing floors with pride? Skylar and Ainsley, the Vanderholt twins, blonde, rich, and trained in sarcasm since birth. They had a rare talent for subtle cruelty, the kind that doesn't leave bruises but cuts deep. They'd hide shoes, rip clothes, slip laxatives into the maid's coffee, all with angelic smiles and fake innocence that only fooled those who'd never met the venom of spoiled privilege. And their father? A millionaire too busy to notice. Or maybe he chose not to notice. Sometimes silence is easier than shame. Then came Marla, petite, dark-skinned, quiet eyes, and a posture that blended humility with strength. She didn't smile too much, but she didn't cower either. The head housekeeper, a woman who had long since given up hope, hesitated before hiring her. "She won't last 2 days," she muttered, but still signed the papers. Marla needed the job, but what she carried on her shoulders was heavier than bills. She carried a secret, one of those deep ones, tucked so far inside that only pain and hope know how to reach it. On her first day, Skylar poured juice on the Persian rug on purpose. On the second, Ainsley pretended to cry and accused Marla of yelling at her. On the third, they hid the cleaning supplies and secretly filmed her searching in a panic. But Marla didn't react like the others. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She didn't even argue. She just took a deep breath, put her glasses back on, and cleaned the floor in silence. Her calm drove the twins crazy. They wanted a show, but what they got was a woman who didn't break under humiliation, dressed as a joke. Mr. Lennox Vanderholt, the patriarch, knew little about Marla. He spent his days locked in his office with meetings and expensive cigars. When he passed her in the hallway, he didn't even notice her brown eyes or the bobby pin in her hair. He just grunted a good morning that sounded more like a bark. To him, cleaning ladies were like rugs. They existed but didn't deserve attention. He had no idea he had just, without even realizing, brought into his home the biggest lesson of his life, one that no amount of money could erase. Day by day, Marla became a steady presence in the middle of the chaos. She didn't smile to please. She didn't shrink herself to fit in. She simply did what needed to be done, and she did it well. Other staff members began seeing her differently. She knew everyone's name, even the forgotten gardeners and the limping cooks. And while she remained invisible to the Vanderholt family, to those who carried the daily weight of being unseen, she was a breath of fresh air. No one could understand how she managed to keep going. But Marla had a reason. In a mansion's hallways, where silence was always uncomfortable, Marla heard things. "That cleaning lady looks stuck up. With that attitude, she won't last a week. She should be thankful to even be here." Whispered words, dripping with contempt, coming from people who'd never scrubbed a toilet. But she never fired back. Some battles are won with patience, and those who carry a secret learn to stay silent until the moment is right. Marla wasn't like the others. She wasn't in that house just for a paycheck. She had a much bigger reason. Even the strongest have their breaking point. One afternoon, while cleaning the twins' bedroom, she found a message scrawled across the mirror in red lipstick. Trash doesn't belong where princesses sleep. She took a deep breath, grabbed a cloth, wiped it clean, but this time her eyes welled up. Not from weakness, but because there's a difference between enduring and simply surviving. And that day, she realized the turning point was closer than she thought. Some stories begin in pain, but end with justice. You just have to know the right moment to turn the page. During one of her breaks, Marla walked to the hidden garden behind the greenhouse. There, she pulled an old, carefully folded note from her pocket. She read it in silence. It was the only thing left from the man who had once changed her life and then vanished without a trace. Her eyes filled with longing. But behind that sadness was a quiet determination. Because in that mansion where no one truly saw her, she carried something no one could take from her, the truth. And with it, a small necklace tucked inside a child's backpack, a necklace that would soon change everything. The twins didn't know. Their father didn't know. Not even the housekeeper had a clue. But Marla wasn't alone in the world. She had someone small but full of light. Someone who, without even realizing it, would spark a chain reaction that would shake the very foundation of the Vanderholt mansion. A secret, tightly kept, about to come to light. That humid Wednesday morning, Marla woke up with a tight feeling in her chest. Owen, her 6-year-old son, was coughing nonstop. The daycare called. They couldn't accept him with a fever. She glanced at the clock, then at her child, and didn't think twice. She bundled him up in a sweater, packed some crackers and water, and headed to work. She knew it was risky. No cleaning lady was allowed to bring her child to work, especially not in a mansion where the word compassion was just for decoration. But she couldn't leave him alone. And in that moment, her motherly instinct spoke louder than fear. "You're going to stay really quiet, okay?" she whispered, leaving the boy with a picture book behind some garden bushes, out of sight from the owners. Owen nodded. He was a gentle child, with big eyes and a smile that could melt anyone. Even so young, he understood his mother's struggle. Around his neck hung a tarnished silver necklace with an oval pendant, a gift from a father he never met. A simple necklace, but one that carried more meaning than millionaire Lennox Vanderholt could ever imagine, until he came face to face with it that fateful morning. Marla was sweeping the side of the house when she heard hysterical laughter. It was Skylar, dragging Owen by the arm. Ainsley was filming with her phone. "Look what we've got. Mommy the maid brought a little rat to play," she mocked. The boy froze, scared. Marla ran toward them, but it was too late. Lennox had just stepped out the back door. The moment he saw the boy with his daughters, his eyes widened, his jaw clenched, and he roared, "Don't touch my daughters!" Silence fell like a thunderclap. The staff stopped in their tracks. The twins froze. And Marla, stunned, placed a hand on her chest. I only brought my son because daycare couldn't take him today. He wasn't going to come inside, sir." "I'm sorry," she said, her voice shaky but firm. Lennox walked straight to Owen. His eyes locked onto the necklace. That necklace, the same one his late daughter had been wearing when she disappeared on a trip. The memory hit him like a wave. "Where did you get this?" "This belongs to my daughter," he shouted, grabbing the pendant roughly. Marla grabbed his wrist firmly. "Let go. That necklace belongs to my son. He's worn it since he was a baby. There's an engraving inside, but I doubt you ever bothered to open it." The tension was thick, like a storm ready to break. A security guard approached, confused, but Lennox waved him off. "I want her out of here. And take the boy, too." Now, the humiliation felt complete. The twins giggled quietly. But Marla didn't back down. She placed Owen behind her, lifted her chin, and said with tears in her eyes, "I didn't touch your daughters, Mr. Vanderholt. I protected them from something you can't even see. And as for my son, you have no idea who he is." Her words cut through the silence like an arrow. Lennox didn't know how to respond. Something about Marla's calm, unwavering tone shook him. It wasn't the kind of answer he expected from a cleaning lady. But there was something about her, something that didn't fit the script he was used to. Marla then gathered Owen's things, walked to the side gate, and left, without apologizing, without looking back. It wasn't pride. It was the dignity of someone who'd been beaten down by life and learned never to lower her head for those who step on others without thinking. Out on the sidewalk, holding her son, Marla cried silently. But it wasn't just sadness. It was exhaustion. The weight of carrying a secret that burned inside her. A truth she couldn't reveal. Not yet. Because behind that necklace was a story the Vanderholts would never expect to hear. And what was coming was bigger than even she could imagine. She just needed a chance. An opening. A name. And ironically, it was the millionaire's own scream that cracked the door open. Meanwhile, inside the mansion, the twins whispered to each other. Skylar seemed shaken. Did you hear how she spoke? It sounded like Mom. Ainsley, colder, just shrugged. But their eyes lingered, curious and suspicious. For the first time, they started to wonder if Marla was really just the maid. And that small doubt would grow, day by day, until it completely changed the way they saw the woman they once mocked, not knowing who they were truly dealing with. Across town, an envelope was quietly dropped off at the mansion's front gate. No sender, just one sentence. The truth is in the necklace. The doorman didn't understand. He left it on the housekeeper's desk and forgot about it. But that envelope, that simple envelope, would be the beginning of an avalanche no one could stop. 2 days passed with no word from Marla. The side gate never creaked open. The mansion's hallways felt quieter, as if something had vanished along with her. During breakfast, the staff whispered. There was something different about that woman. Her eyes were strong. The twins avoided the topic, but Skylar kept checking her phone, waiting for any update. Then, on a cloudy morning, a black car pulled up to the front entrance. A woman in a gray suit stepped out with steady strides. In her hands, a leather folder and a sealed envelope. Her name was Greta Ellingham, and no one had any idea what she was about to reveal. I have a scheduled appointment with Mr. Lennox Vanderholt. My name is Greta Ellingham. I'm here on behalf of Marla Dunley, she said, her voice firm and direct. Lennox, annoyed, allowed her in. In the main sitting room, he sat down with the look of a man expecting another pathetic attempt at blackmail. But when he heard the name Lucas Vanderholt, his face turned pale. What does my brother have to do with this? He asked, crossing his arms. Greta opened the folder and placed an old will on the table, dated 2016. It was Lucas's handwriting. His younger brother, the one Lennox claimed had died in a car crash in New Jersey. Lucas didn't die that day. He disappeared. And in the months before that, he had a relationship with Marla Dunley. Here are photos, messages, hotel records, and finally, a DNA test taken 5 years ago proving Owen is his biological son. Lennox rubbed his face. The impact hit him hard enough that he couldn't even fake indifference. This is a scam. She forged everything. She's just a gold digger. But Greta remained unshaken. She opened another envelope. Inside, the pendant from the necklace, now opened. You've seen this necklace before, but you never bothered to open it. There's a recording inside. Would you like to hear it? She pressed play. The voice was unmistakable. If anything happens to me, I want Owen to receive everything that's rightfully his. And I want Marla to know I never stopped loving her. I'm sorry. The room fell silent. Lennox stood slowly, as if the chair itself pushed him forward. His mind drifted back to that day on the road, the fight with his brother, the veiled threats. He left because of me, he murmured. It was the first time in years the millionaire showed any sign of vulnerability. But to Greta, that didn't matter. Justice needed to be done, and Marla wasn't after revenge. She just wanted to be heard. The newspapers didn't know. The neighbors didn't know. Not even the family's longtime attorneys had any clue. But Marla had followed every lead, every trace of the man who vanished without a word. She found his old friends, tracked down a clinic where he'd been treated, and after years of quiet searching, she proved what the world refused to believe, that a simple woman, a cleaning lady, could carry in her hands the final wish of a man everyone else had forgotten. And behind her silence, there was a secret with a name, a last name, and a rightful heir to the Vanderholt name. In the staff wing, the news hit like thunder. The cook wiped her eyes with her apron. The gardener stopped working to hear better. She always said she just wanted a little peace. And look what she was carrying. The housekeeper, who once doubted Marla, felt a wave of shame. "This house needs a cleaning, but not of the floors, of the soul," she whispered before shutting the pantry door and letting her tears fall. The greatest lesson hadn't come from etiquette books, but from a woman who scrubbed floors with dignity, while carrying a pain no one ever cared to see. Ainsley tried to laugh it off. Come on, a maid turning out to be an heir? That's straight out of soap opera. But Skylar couldn't laugh. There was something in Owen's eyes that unsettled her. She remembered when the little boy helped her untangle her shoelace from the fence. When he shared his cookie with her, even after being teased. What if he really is our cousin?" she asked, hesitant. For the first time, Skylar began to see life with fewer filters and more empathy. She started to realize that sometimes those who carry the least carry the most history. Meanwhile, Greta was preparing the documents to ensure Lucas's inheritance was passed down properly. Marla didn't want the mansion. She didn't care about the Vanderholt name. She only wanted what was rightfully Owen's: dignity, recognition, security, and if possible, a bit of peace. But the media was already sniffing out the scandal. "Cleaning lady inherits billion-dollar fortune," screamed the headlines, twisting everything out of shape. Marla refused interviews. She knew that in a world full of judgment, truth is the only thing that doesn't need a spotlight. That same night, a copy of the voice recording was placed in the family's safe. Lennox played it over and over again, like a man searching for forgiveness where none could be found. For days, he avoided the mirror, because the worst kind of humiliation is realizing you failed as a brother, as a boss, as a human being, and the secret he tried to bury had come back with a force no amount of money could hide again. Owen, still just a little boy, didn't fully understand the weight of what had happened. But when he laid his head in his mother's lap and heard her whisper, "We're going to be okay now," he smiled. And in that smile, there was a calm before a new storm. Because the heart of the Vanderholt mansion still wasn't ready for the next shock. The scandal was no longer secret. The Vanderholt name was everywhere, but not in the way the billionaire wanted. What was once seen as a respected family had become the center of a story marked by shame and silence. Lennox, once admired, began to avoid public events. Inside the mansion, tension hung in the air, but no one felt the weight of it quite like Skylar. She had started to see the world differently, with eyes that now recognized the damage she had caused without even knowing. She began noticing the small things, the tired expressions of the maids, the fear in the eyes of the staff, how everyone seemed to walk on eggshells around the boss. But what hurt most was remembering Owen's smile, the little boy she'd mocked, never imagining the secret he carried. One night, Skylar walked into her sister's room with tears in her eyes. "We need to apologize. We can't keep pretending nothing happened." Ainsley stared at her in silence. But deep down, she too had begun to feel the weight of the lesson life was now forcing on them. The next day, something unexpected happened in the staff dining room. The Vanderholt twins, as flawless as ever, dressed in white, faces serious, stepped into a space they had never entered before. Everyone stopped. Even the clatter of dishes fell silent. Skylar walked up to Marla, who was sitting quietly with a cup of tea. "You taught us more than any teacher ever could. We mocked you, not knowing your pain. And Owen, he's our cousin, and we're ashamed of what we did." The room fell still. Marla simply lifted her eyes and said nothing. Her silence was louder than 1,000 speeches. Lennox found out about it later that afternoon. Furious, he called his daughters into the study. "You have no idea what you're doing. She's trying to destroy us," he shouted, his voice cracking. But for the first time, Skylar stood her ground. "She's not trying to destroy anything. She just wants justice. You're the one who's been running from it your whole life." It was the first visible crack in the arrogant empire he had built around himself. And from that moment on, something began to crumble inside him. Because hearing the truth from your own children, that's one of the deepest humiliations a millionaire can face. Greta's legal team continued the proceedings. And under growing public pressure, Lennox was forced to give in. Lucas's inheritance was officially granted to Owen. An educational trust was created. But more than that, respect for Marla became unavoidable. She was no longer just the cleaning lady. She was now recognized as a rightful part of the Vanderholt story. Some staff even began calling her Mrs. Marla, but she always corrected them with a warm smile. Just Marla, please. She wasn't looking for titles, just dignity. Ainsley, though once the most resistant to change, began visiting little Owen on weekends. She brought toys, books, and treats. One afternoon, he looked up and asked, "Are you really my cousin?" She smiled. "I am, and I promise I'll never laugh at someone again just because they look different." That sentence, spoken with the sincerity of someone trying to start over, stayed in Marla's mind for days. Because seeing a child grow up well is a blessing. But watching another child heal from the inside out, that's a rare and beautiful kind of transformation. The halls of the mansion began to change. Soft music played. There were quiet laughs and even the scent of cookies in the afternoons, thanks to Owen, who loved baking with Miss Clarabelle in the kitchen. The mansion, once a symbol of distance, was beginning to feel more like a home. And Marla, though still carrying scars, smiled more often. She knew there were still battles ahead, but she also understood that some victories don't come with fireworks. They come in silence, in earned respect, in the gaze that once looked down on you, now looking up in admiration. Lennox took a long time to show his face in public again, but eventually, under pressure, he held a press conference. With a measured expression and a tight voice, he said, "I want to publicly apologize to Miss Marla Dunley. I acknowledge my mistake, and I hope that, with time, she and her son can live in peace." It wasn't much, but it was a start. The pride still lived in his voice, but the fall could already be seen in his eyes. Because when truth tears through the veil of lies, even billionaires are forced, painfully, to face what they pretended not to see. Marla didn't attend the press conference. She was busy taking care of Owen, who had a fever that day. She chose her son's embrace over any stage, because her fight was never about applause. It was about justice. And the most incredible part of it all, Owen, without even knowing, had sparked the greatest transformation that House had ever seen. A little boy, a necklace, and an invisible mother, who faced an empire with nothing but quiet dignity. But on the other end of a phone line, something new was coming. An unexpected call. An invitation to something she had never imagined. A new beginning, or maybe a greater purpose. Months had passed since the last big turning point. The Vanderholt mansion was no longer the same. The arrogant tone had faded, replaced by a lighter, almost homely atmosphere. Marla, now recognized as part of the family, had politely turned down the offer to live there. Instead, she chose to rent a modest house with a garden where Owen could run and play freely. But what no one expected was what she'd do with the inheritance. While many imagined luxury trips or flashy spending, Marla focused on something that came straight from the heart, a support center for single mothers. She named it Casa Lucas. It was inaugurated on a rainy afternoon, surrounded by ordinary people. No politicians, no society columnists, no red carpet. Marla insisted on keeping everything accessible. The center offered classes, psychological support, and meals for mothers in vulnerable situations, because she knew, firsthand, what it meant to be judged, humiliated, and invisible. "This place isn't about charity. It's about dignity," she said, holding her son's hand tightly beside her. Even the most seasoned volunteers wiped away tears at those words. Owen was thriving. He had bright eyes, endless questions, and an impressive talent for drawing. On one of the center's walls, he taped a drawing of his mother holding a feather duster, wearing a superhero cape. Beside her were two blonde girls holding flowers. When Skylar saw it, she cried. Not out of guilt, but out of gratitude. "You didn't just save our home. You saved us," she said, handing Marla a handwritten letter. Marla just smiled, with that quiet grace of someone who doesn't need to show off to leave a mark on the world. Meanwhile, Lennox Vanderholt traveled less. Not because he couldn't, but because, after everything, he realized he had spent his life running from the things that truly mattered. For the first time, he asked a staff member for her full name. For the first time, He walked into the kitchen and complimented a meal. The lesson had arrived late, but it had arrived. And though he'd never admitted aloud, he knew he had been defeated, not by lawyers, not by lawsuits, not by numbers, but by a woman who once scrubbed bathrooms in silence, and who, without even knowing, had exposed all the dirt he'd spent years trying to hide. Marla refused interviews. She never liked the spotlight. To her, Owen was what mattered. He was the future, her greatest miracle. Every night, as she tucked him into bed, she whispered a phrase learned through pain. No one can make you feel small, son. Only you can forget who you are. And in that simple home, full of truth, there was more nobility than in many castles. Because where love lives, there's no room for arrogance. And what began in humiliation had become a life lesson for everyone who crossed paths with that quiet woman. A few weeks later, Owen's school principal called. She invited Marla to share her story at an event about overcoming challenges. Marla kindly declined. She said she preferred to inspire through actions, not speeches. But she left behind an anonymous note to be read on stage. It said, "True strength doesn't belong to the one who shouts the loudest. It lives in the one who chooses silence and acts." When those words were read, no one dared to break the silence. A silence filled with respect. Clarabelle, the old cook from the mansion, now worked at Casa Lucas. One afternoon, between batches of cookies and a chat about grandchildren, she turned to Marla and said, "We thought you were just another cleaning lady, but you were the cleaning this family needed." They both laughed, but their eyes welled up, because when truth touches the heart, it doesn't need an argument, just time. And Marla, with patience, had built more than justice. She built bridges where there had only been walls. The Vanderholt twins began volunteering at the center. Ainsley gave tutoring lessons. Schuyler organized charity bazaars. The past still existed, but it no longer defined them. And maybe the most beautiful secret in this whole story wasn't in the necklace or in the will, but in the quiet transformation of two young women who, through their own mistakes, learned how to be better. Because in the end, we all carry some kind of dirt inside, but very few have the courage to truly clean it up. Owen ran through the garden, his hair tousled by the wind and his heart light. Marla watched from the porch, tea in hand, peace in her eyes. She had been through so much: humiliation, pain, abandonment. But she held no resentment, because those who truly overcome don't need revenge. They need to live. And that's what she did. She lived with dignity, with purpose, with love. After all, sometimes the woman cleaning the floors is the only one brave enough to show where the real dirt is hiding. Like this video if the story moved you. Subscribe to Fire Story for more stories that touch and inspire. And drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. We'd love to know.